I'd always thought of our family as pretty ordinary. But one night reminded me how quickly life can shift. We lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing seemed to change. Days passed in the same rhythm, predictable, steady. My mom was always busy with work and running the household. My dad was the quieter one, more reserved. My relationship with them was good, but with Dad there was always a small distance, as if a part of him stayed locked away. When Mom started traveling more for work, the house felt different. It wasn't that Dad and I didn't get along, but without her presence balancing things, there was a new quietness that settled in. We had to find a way to share the space in a way we never had before. I was 19, about to start my second year of college and home for the summer. Mom was gone on a 2-week work trip, leaving just Dad and me. I assumed it would be simple, quiet dinners, maybe days where our routines barely crossed. But it became something else entirely. It started on a warm Saturday evening. We'd spent the day separately. Me in my room scrolling through my phone, Dad out in the garage working on something. When dinner time came, he called me down. He'd made pasta, and we ate together in the calm of the kitchen. The evening sun cast a soft golden light through the windows, making the moment feel almost unreal. "How's everything going?" he asked, breaking the silence as he twirled pasta on his fork. "Good," I replied. "Same as always." He nodded. We ate in silence for a few moments. I noticed him glance at me now and then, like there was something on his mind. That wasn't unusual. Dad was never a big talker, but the air felt different somehow. "You know," he said, setting his fork down, "it's nice having you around more. We don't talk as much these days." He was right. Between school and friends, I hadn't spent much time with him lately. Not like when I was a kid, when we'd work on projects together or go fishing on weekends. "Yeah," I said with a small smile. "Things just got busy. College and everything." He smiled back, though there was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. "I get it," he said softly. "But it's important to stay connected, especially now with your mom traveling more." We finished dinner, and I began clearing the plates. "I'll take care of it," Dad said, standing. "Why don't we watch a movie? We haven't done that in a while." Felt a little unusual, but I agreed. Soon we were in the living room, the TV flickering as Dad flipped through channels before settling on an old action movie. I wasn't fully paying attention. My thoughts drifted as the movie played. Dad sat beside me on the couch, a little closer than usual. It wasn't uncomfortable, just noticeable. As the night went on, the quiet between us took on a different weight. I couldn't quite explain it, just a sense of awareness. Every so often, when I glanced over, I found his eyes already on me, and I wondered what he was thinking. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was reading too much into the moment. But then he shifted in his seat. His hand brushed lightly against my shoulder, probably by accident, but it stayed there a second longer than I expected. My breath caught, and I shifted in my seat, glancing at the TV, pretending to focus on the movie. The air between us felt heavier. I tried to keep my mind on the action scenes flashing across the screen, but I couldn't shake the awareness of his presence beside me. Every small movement seemed amplified, every glance carrying weight I didn't know how to interpret. "Dad," I said quietly, unsure what I even meant to follow it with. He leaned forward slightly, his voice low. "What is it?" Something in his tone, gentle but serious, made it harder to speak. I hesitated, my thoughts tangled. Maybe I was overthinking, maybe it was nothing. I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came. I trailed off, shaking my head. "Never mind." He gave a small nod, though his eyes stayed on me for a moment longer. The room felt warmer, closer. I knew I needed to step away. "I think I'm going to head to bed," I said, my voice unsteady. "All right," he replied simply, his expression unreadable. Upstairs, lying in the dark, I stared at the ceiling. My mind replayed the evening again and again, trying to make sense of it. Maybe I had misread the whole thing. Still, a strange unease clung to me, leaving me restless. Something in our dynamic had shifted, and I didn't know how to bridge the gap it left behind. The next morning, the house was quiet. I stayed in my room longer than usual, avoiding the kitchen. But hunger eventually pushed me downstairs. Sunlight poured through the windows, but the brightness didn't match the heaviness I felt inside. The kitchen was empty at first, and I let out a quiet sigh of relief. Maybe I wouldn't have to see him just yet. But moments later, I heard footsteps. My chest tightened as Dad walked in, freshly dressed, looking as if it was any other day. "Morning," he said with a faint smile. "Morning," I replied, my voice tight as I sat down with my cereal. He poured himself coffee and sat across from me. I kept my gaze low, but I could feel him studying me. "You seemed a little off last night," he said casually, though there was something in his tone I couldn't quite place. "Just tired," I murmured. He nodded slowly, but it didn't feel like he believed me. Silence stretched between us, each second making me more aware of how unsettled I felt. "We don't have to make things weird," Dad said suddenly, setting his mug down. "We're family. We can talk about anything." His words were simple, but they landed with a weight that left me unsure how to respond. I just nodded, unsure whether speaking would make things better or worse. "It's not really a challenge," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though nerves still crept in. "Nothing actually happened, right?" Dad leaned back in his chair, studying me for a long moment. "That's up to you," he said quietly. "If you don't want to talk, we don't have to. But if something's on your mind, you can tell me." I stared at him, my thoughts running in circles. Was he trying to have a serious conversation? Or was I the one turning this into something heavier than it was? I don't know what to say," I admitted softly. Dad's expression softened. "It's okay," he said. "You don't have to have the words right now. I just want you to feel like you can be open with me." The weight of the moment was too much. I stood abruptly, grabbing my phone from the counter. "I'm going to head out for a bit. I need some air." He didn't stop me, only nodded. "All right, take your time." The cool breeze outside hit my face, and I let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My thoughts were a mess. Part of me wanted to believe I was just overreacting, but deep down, I knew something in our dynamic had shifted, and I didn't know how to handle it. I walked for a while through the quiet streets, hoping the rhythm of my footsteps would clear my head. But no matter how far I went, the memory of our tense exchanges stayed with me. By the time I returned, the sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the house. I hesitated before stepping inside. The sound of the TV drifted from the living room. Dad, flipping through channels. He glanced up as I passed. "Feel better?" he asked casually. "Yeah," I lied, heading toward the stairs. "Just needed to clear my head." "Good," he said, eyes following me. "Let me know if you want to talk later." That night, I stayed in my room, avoiding conversation. I could hear the muffled sound of the TV, then the creak of floorboards as Dad went to bed. But I didn't come out. The next few days were much the same, short exchanges, careful distance. The unspoken weight between us lingered, making even the simplest interactions feel loaded. Then came Friday night. Mom was still away and I had spent most of the day holed up in my room, trying to distract myself. Eventually, I decided to step outside for some fresh air. When I came downstairs, Dad was on the couch, a beer in hand. He looked up, and something in his expression made my stomach tighten. Not unkind, but heavier somehow. "Hey," he said, his voice low. "Sit with me for a bit." I hesitated. "I'm just heading out for a walk," I said quickly. Before I could leave, he stood, walking toward me at an unhurried pace. My pulse quickened, not out of fear of him, but from the sheer intensity of the moment. "You don't have to keep avoiding me," he said gently. "It's just us here. We can figure this out." The living room suddenly felt smaller, quieter. I took a step back toward the door, unsure how to respond. "I'm fine," I murmured, though I wasn't. We both knew it. His eyes stayed on me, searching for something I wasn't ready to give. His eyes stayed on mine, and for a moment neither of us moved. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something, uncertain if I was about to fall or finally step back to safety. You don't have to pretend, Dad said, his tone low. I can tell something's bothering you. A chill ran through me, though I couldn't explain why. The words caught in my throat. My thoughts tangled and knotted, refusing to come out in any order that made sense. He stepped forward, closing the space between us. My body felt tense, my muscles stiff. The air in the room seemed to thicken. You don't have to explain it now, he continued. Just don't shut me out. Let me help. It should have sounded comforting, but it didn't. The weight in his voice, the way his gaze locked on mine, made it feel like I was being pulled into a conversation I wasn't ready to have. This isn't right, I managed to say, my voice trembling despite my best effort to steady it. His expression didn't change. I know it's confusing, he said calmly, but you'll understand eventually. The walls seemed to close in, and I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. My breathing grew shallow. I needed space now. I need some air, I said quickly, stepping back toward the door. He didn't stop me this time, just watched, silent, as I left the room. The cool night air outside wrapped around me, but it didn't untangle the tight knot in my stomach. I walked for what felt like hours, my thoughts chasing themselves in frantic circles. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was all in my head. But no, that heavy look in his eyes, the way the room felt, those weren't my imagination. By the time I returned home, the house was dark and still. I slipped inside, half expecting to hear his voice, but there was nothing except the soft hum of the refrigerator. I went upstairs, locking my bedroom door behind me. My mind was spinning. I wanted to believe this was over, that whatever strange tension had been building between us would fade. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. The next morning, the feeling was still there, like a weight on my chest. I stayed in my room for as long as I could, but the silence in the house made the air feel heavy. Eventually, I made myself go downstairs. Each step felt like it pulled me deeper into something I didn't want to face. The kitchen was empty, but the TV murmured faintly from the living room. Dad sat on the couch, eyes fixed on the screen. But I knew, without him saying a word, that he had been waiting for me. "Morning," he said without looking at me. His voice sounded casual, but there was something sharp beneath it that I couldn't ignore. "Morning," I replied, barely above a whisper. I stood there for a moment, not sure what to do next. Pretending everything was fine wasn't an option anymore, but starting this conversation felt impossible. Finally, I took a deep breath and sat down across from him. "We need to talk," I said, my voice trembling slightly. His eyes lifted to mine, serious, but with an edge I couldn't quite name. "About what?" "You know," I said quietly, "last night, the way things went." For a moment he didn't answer. His face stayed still, unreadable. Then he sighed, leaning back against the couch. "I think you're making this into something bigger than it is," he said slowly. A mix of anger and disbelief rose inside me. "I'm not making it up," I said, sharper than I meant to. "The way you acted, the things you said." His jaw tightened. He turned toward the TV like he could make the conversation vanish by ignoring it. "I didn't mean anything by it," he muttered. "I was just trying to be there for you. You've been different lately, older. I wanted you to know you could come to me." "That's not what it felt like," I said, my heart hammering. For a second, something flickered in his expression. Regret, maybe, but it was gone as quickly as it came. "You're confused," he said firmly. "I'm your father. I'd never hurt you." "It's not about hurting me," I said, my voice unsteady. "It's about crossing a line." The words hung in the air like heavy smoke. I couldn't take them back, and I didn't want to. He stood, pacing with restless energy. "This is ridiculous. You're reading too much into it." But I knew I wasn't. "I'm not a kid anymore," I said. "I know when something's not right." He stopped pacing, meeting my eyes. Silence stretched between us, and I could almost hear the thoughts grinding in his head. Finally, he let out a long breath, shoulders slumping. "I didn't want things to get weird," he said quietly. "But they did. I don't know why. I've been stressed, lonely, Your mom's gone so much. I didn't think about how it might come across. The admission landed like a stone in my stomach. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was the truth as he saw it. I don't know how to fix this, he added, voice breaking slightly. We need help, I said. We can't just leave it like this. He nodded slowly, his face pale. I'll figure something out. But I wasn't sure he could. The days that followed were filled with a silence that felt heavier than words. We only spoke about practical things, when Mom would be home, what groceries we needed, while the real problem sat between us like a wall. When Mom finally returned, smiling and tired from her trip, I felt a wave of guilt. She had no idea what had happened while she was gone. But I couldn't keep it from her forever. That night after dinner, I sat her down and told her everything. I told her about the tension, about how Dad's behavior had unsettled me, about how unsafe I had felt in my own home. She listened without interrupting, her face growing paler with every word. By the time I finished, she was silent, her hands still, her eyes searching mine for answers neither of us had. Silence hung between us. I don't know what to do, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. I don't know how to fix this. Mom didn't speak for a long time. She just sat there, staring into the distance, her face tight with anger and hurt. Finally, she stood, her movements sharp and deliberate. I'll handle it, she said quietly, her voice cold. This isn't your fault. And she did handle it. The next few weeks blurred together. Hard conversations, endless meetings with therapists and counselors, and the slow work of trying to piece our broken family back together. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was one of the hardest things I had ever faced. But slowly, things began to shift. Slowly, we began to heal. Dad moved out for a while, giving us space. In that time, I turned my focus inward, finding my own strength, trying to understand the complicated emotions I'd been carrying for so long. I didn't know if I would ever fully forgive him, or if things could ever go back to the way they once were. But I knew I couldn't let this define me. And, in time, I found a way to move forward. Thankfully, I did.